Hello everyone, I'm Gizmat, and welcome back to Mechanics Dismantled. Now, just a quick update before we get started. I recently planned out my videos until the end of March, and I've decided that every other week I'm going to make an episode of Mechanics Dismantled, and then the weeks between I'm going to make a tutorial. These tutorials will either be digital art or world building, or generally something I want to share my experience on, so stick around for those. Now, let's get going with the video. This episode will be taking a look at turns, timekeeping, and event sequencing. What are the different ways of controlling the flow of time, and how are they implemented to keep the game fun and exciting? Well, there are really three main categories in how games handle time and the progression of game events: real-time, turn-based, and a mix of the two. Let's talk about each of them individually, starting with real-time. When you think of real-time games, shooters like Call of Duty or real-time strategies like League of Legends often come to mind. The events of the game are continuous and never stop to give you time to think. Real-time games are great because they keep the player on their toes and encourage them to hone their reaction times. Having to strategize under pressure is part of the appeal of RTS games, and one of the reasons they're so incredibly popular. Theoretically, there's no limit to how many actions you can perform in a certain time frame. Also, you can dictate exactly how long a game lasts, and it isn't affected by how much a player has to get done. These tend to be video games because when a computer can count the time exactly for you, using its clock, it makes the whole experience far easier. Board, card and tabletop games with real-time elements do exist, but they're almost always mixed, incorporating some real-time and some turn-based sections. I guess Snap is a real-time card game? That's the only one I can think of that's exclusively real-time, but hey, it's an example, isn't it? This is a bit of a tangent to my main point, but I thought I'd quickly just explain how players are synchronized with each other in online games. The events of the game are all synchronized to a central clock on the game's server, and not everyone's device clock. This is so once it's received all the instructions from all the players, it can process them and send out new data in response to what's happened, how people have moved, whether anyone's been hurt, and so on. Well, that's the plan anyway. If you have a really bad connection to the server, instructions take ages to get through, and there comes a point where the server just says, "Look man, you're holding everyone up, and I really can't wait any longer to send out this next game state. I'm just going to send it without you." Which is why if you have bad connection, your instructions don't register until much later. Anyway, I know that was a tangent, but I just explained lag. There you go, take it or leave it. Right, let's move on to turn-based games. Turn-based games have their events laid out in a set sequence. Instead of players just doing whatever they want as fast as they can, it follows a set I go, you go pattern. Tabletop games are often turn-based, and my favourite go-to example, Warhammer, fits into this category. Its turns are further subdivided into phases, but as a whole, it follows the same general pattern. I go, you go, I go, you go, I go, and then the assault doctrine comes into effect and I lose by default. Turn-based games are nice because they often feel more thoughtful and more strategic than real-time games. You don't have to make a spur-of-the-moment decision, and you can really consider your options and take your time making the best choices. Sometimes turns are a bit more complex. For example, individual units may be sorted according to initiative, and then the controlling player takes a turn with each of them in that order. This was the case in Final Fantasy Tactics from 1997, and it's still a turn-based game, but just slightly different kind. One of the largest potential drawbacks of turn-based games is that while one player is taking their turn, the other player is just sitting around with nothing to do. This is especially irritating if your opponent is indecisive, or their turn just takes ages because they have a lot to do. A lot of turn-based games keep both players busy by having you do something in your opponent's turn. Sticking with the example of Warhammer, every time your opponent attacks one of your units during their turn, you have to roll armor saves for them to see if they die or not. These dice could easily be rolled by your opponent, but having the non-active player roll them keeps them occupied and prevents too much boredom. Another way of sorting out this problem that I've seen is in the wargame Infinity. During your opponent's turn, you get these things called AROs, or automatic reaction orders. These are actions you can take when the active player triggers them. For example, if one of their units runs in front of one of your units during their movement, you get a free round of pot shots at that unit. Now, let's take a look at some mixed time games. Mixed time isn't the official definition, but I've made it up to mean a game which includes both real-time and turn-based elements. Mixed time appears in both electronic and physical media, and I think it's quite evenly distributed between both. An example of a mixed time game would be chess using a clock. Quite simply, it's a turn-based game, but those turns have a real-time duration limit on them. Other ways mixed time is implemented include a timeline system like in Child of Light, which is, by the way, one of my favourite all-time games. Check it out for sure. In Child of Light, characters move along a timeline and take their turns when they reach the end of it. Different characters move along the timeline at different speeds, and you can inflict slowing effects on your enemies to make them progress at a slower pace. Essentially, this means that faster characters will be able to overtake other ones and sneak in extra actions every now and then. Even though characters do still take turns, their speed is measured on a real-life scale. The distinction between real-time and turn-based games isn't quite as black and white as it may first appear. Though these are two of the most common timekeeping systems in gaming, there are many, many shades of grey in between them, and many ways to mix timekeeping systems to make something new and unique. I've been Carping Gizmat, and thanks for joining me on this episode of Mechanics Dismantled. If you enjoyed, be sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below suggesting what I ought to cover next. I also have a Discord in the description, give it a shot. I announce all my videos there, and hopefully one day I'll be able to do events and things. I'm trying to sort of build up a community, so if you could check that out, that'd be brilliant. Bye for now.